Are we live?
We are live.
Okay. Hi, I'm Eka Kapiotis, and I'm here on behalf of the Front Royal Women's Resource Center. And it's our second woman gathering. We're very excited about our events that we're putting together on the third Thursday of the month at 5:30 at Open House Meet in the Middle. And so what we'll be doing is doing a live interview, and in the midst of doing networking and hanging around, and we've already heard some really great stories from people here, have a little wine. And I'm very thrilled to have Norma Jean Shaw as my guest today. We'll be chatting in just a minute, but I have been asked to do just a little bit of, I hate to call it a meditation because we're not going to go quite that deep, but you know, as women, we tend to be running in 50 different directions and having 50 different things going on all at once. So I'd like to take this opportunity to invite everybody to just take a breath, let yourself let go of the day and everything that might be external to you right now. Allow yourself to just settle into your body and let yourself feel you are sitting on something probably, and let your chair do its job of holding you up. Let yourself take a nice breath and let it go. And just imagine that you're allowing yourself to settle in as though you are coming in for a landing into your own body. So we're just going to take a minute and breathe together. And just feel your body as you take a breath. Know that at this moment you're connecting not only by watching this video, whether you're watching it live or later on, but that we're all connecting as women. And the purpose of this gathering is woman gathering. So know that you're not only connecting right now with your own self, but with the intention of many women who are here to support each other. So, and with that, we'll get started with our interview. Thank you so much, Norma Jean, for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a flip of the switch.
It is a flip of the switch because Norma Jean and I met at Valley today at the radio station here in Front Royal.
Mm-hmm.
And Norma Jean was the announcer, and so you would interview, well, I would do the interviews, but you were the real interviewer.
We all interviewed each other, I think, because you would bring these fascinating guests, and you would have questions that you would want to ask, but I would be so entranced that I would spin my own questions in. So it really was kind of a conversation more than an interview, I think.
Yes, and I really enjoyed your questions and how you approached people. So I want to commend you for that, because I felt like in the time that I did that with you, you helped me become a better interviewer as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm glad that we were able to continue our relationship after I moved on to start my own newspaper.
Yes, so the fascinating thing about Norma Jean is she has started her own newspaper, the Royal Examiner. And so would you like to say a little bit about what that's about?
Well, sure. When I left the radio station, it was because I wanted to do more local stories that we could spend more time on. With doing a 30-minute newscast, it was a touch of what was going on locally and in the state news, and then a 30-minute more in-depth conversation. But I liked being able to get the news behind the news, which is what the theme of the Royal Examiner is.
Yes.
So I teamed up with Mike McNeil, a local businessman, national media, and with that we do shirts, any kind of document that you would need for your business. We do branding, we do website design. If there's something that you need done, Mike likes to say, we can do it, or I know a guy who can get it done. But
Yes.
I've known him since I was a child. My family had a business here in town, a restaurant.
Oh.
And I grew up knowing Mike. And he offered me my first job out of college, but I got offered a job at McNeil Lehrer NewsHour, so I turned him down.
Oh, Okay.
And he didn't hold it against me. But we decided that it would be nice to venture into the newspaper business. We are online for now, which is good because we like to say we go where you go. I think about 75% of our people read on the phone, at work, if they carpool in the car, while they're brushing their teeth, probably some of them before they turn in at night. So
Yes.
we try to dig into the stories, and sometimes they take longer. We don't have a big staff to cover all the stories that a newspaper with a full staff would, but we dig in and get some more information that's germane to the people of Warren County and Front Royal.
So there was something about that you wanted to bring a more in-depth look at what's happening in our community, and you're really doing a great job of it.
Thank you. It's a labor of love, and Roger Bianchini was retired and itching to work as well, and he and I have been friends for a long time, so we felt like it was a good opportunity for us to do something. And I started off doing marketing actually for Mike a little bit in the summer. He was running for town council, and I helped him a little bit with some campaign pieces and did a little marketing. So I'm a people person, and since I was a little kid, my dad used to say, "You're the nosiest kid I know." I'd say, "No, I'm inquisitive. I'm not nosy. I'm not nosy." So I always have been wanting to find out, what's going on, what the facts are, and that type of thing.
Yeah, so that's serving you well, and it sounds like you've come full circle. Mike offered you a job back in your 20s, and here you are again, coming back, huh?
Yeah, he's a good guy. I'm really grateful for the opportunity because I wasn't really sure what I was going to do when the station decided to move in a different direction, and they certainly do have a different product than when I was there. So
yeah, and it's so wonderful. I mean, what a great thing that you put this together out of that. So I get your email every morning.
Oh, good.
And I look at every article because I want to know what's happening in town. I mean, it's kind of fascinating. I used to get some papers, but I don't anymore. I don't go to my mailbox enough to get any daily paper. So now I just have to look in my email box, and there's your...
Well, thanks for plugging us.
Yeah.
But for folks who aren't familiar with the Royal Examiner, royalexaminer.com, you can read it online. Free subscription. We don't share your information, so you won't get spam. But we offer the local news. But what do you think as a subscriber? We have all kinds of information. I know there was an article recently about cooking Valentine's dinner for your love. Different kinds of articles. There's some financial information about how to save money, all kinds of different tips, articles, lots of information that you can pick and choose from. But we do send out the news articles, everything that publishes from the day before at 7 a.m.
Okay. And, I think it's lovely when you include those kinds of interest things because, I mean, I think it's, as a person who's been featured in some articles here and there, it's a lot of fun to see your name in print and to get, and not only me, but a lot of people in the community, when you have additional things that are happening that you can bring to awareness, I think people really love it. I mean, you just don't get that kind of a personal touch.
Well,
and,
we're trying to do stories that might not seem newspaper worthy. We had the Kiwanis Person of the Year, a lady who recently moved to the community, and she'd been a volunteer for 2 years, and she couldn't believe it when I called her to say, "I'd like to do an article about you being named the Kiwanis Person of the Year," and she said, "Really?" And that's news. That's newsworthy because people are invested in the community and they contribute in wonderful ways, and that's just as important as what the town council did. It might not affect you in quite the same way, but it's still newsworthy.
Well, and I think it's just a wonderful way to spread goodwill and let people know what's happening out there because so many people are doing really fabulous things in our community and a lot of it goes unnoticed. So anything that you can do to promote that, I mean,
Absolutely.
Great. And then, of course, Valentine's cooking articles would always be right up my alley, especially if they have something to do with chocolate.
I hear our audience laughing. Well, it's funny because Mike had that article, and the ladies in the office and I talked about it, and it was a nice chicken dinner, and we looked at it and we said, you know what? If our husbands cooked that dinner for us, and then we had to go behind him and clean up the kitchen, we would not be happy. But
So-
he's the publisher, so every now and then we have to let him have his way.
Yeah.
But yeah, next time there'll be a chocolate article. I'll pull
Okay.
rank.
There you go. Easter's coming. There's
There you
chocolate
go.
for that.
Absolutely.
Chocolate for every occasion,
Yes,
right?
yes, indeed. So-
Well, I know that you said that you started out by working at McNeil Lehrer, and that's what a way to start. Or you were say more about what that
Well,
was.
actually, that was further in my career. I was
Uh-huh.
very lucky. I went to Bridgewater my first year, and they did not have a communication degree at that time. And my original plan was to get journalism or communication and maybe go to law school.
Mhm.
So I transferred to Eastern New Mexico University my second year, and
Wow.
my mom couldn't believe it, and my father was heartbroken. He's like,
Uh-huh.
why do you want to go so far away?
Yeah.
But I did my research, and out-of-state tuition was, I think at that time, about $5,000 a year. I'd already been paying, I think, about $15,000 at Bridgewater. It's now
Wow.
about $38,000.
Yeah.
But it was the best school for the money. There was a PBS station on campus, and I knew that I'd be able to do news as a reporter, and if I were good enough, I'd be able to do sit-down news as an anchor, and I was able to accomplish both those things before I
Wow.
graduated.
Wow.
But my dad died my first semester there during
Oh.
final exams in December. And I quickly had to find a way to pay for school. And I was good in my announcing classes, and a local radio station in Clovis, New Mexico, which is where Buddy Holly did his recording with Norman Petty, was his name. Yeah,
Mhm.
Norman Petty. That little station, Clovis, in Clovis, New Mexico, sent an email out to, maybe not an email at that point,
I
probably
know,
a
like,
phone
wow,
call.
that
No,
was-
because I learned typing. I learned how to do news stories with a
Mhm.
typewriter.
Right.
But anyway, a notice was sent out saying we need a few students to audition for an overnight DJ position.
Mhm.
So I was making money as an overnight DJ while going to school. And
Wow.
then I got to work for Eastern New Mexico University PBS station there, and then later on other PBS stations as a weekend news anchor.
Mhm.
So I got that really good training because I was in the right place at the right time, and because I needed money.
Yeah.
So that was a blessing.
Well, and that, I mean, I'm trying to remember what kind of what news was like back then, but I'm
Mhm.
assuming that PBS even then did the more in-depth stories.
They did, but we were the only station in the nation at a college that did a 5-night-a-week newscast. There were
Wow.
stations on campuses that did a 30-minute news magazine, but we were a professional outfit even back then in the 80s, in the early 80s, and I was struck by that, and I wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So by the time I graduated in May of '86, and then I went to McNeil Lehrer NewsHour in June,
Mhm.
and I worked like a dog, but I loved every second of it, and I have great stories and great memories, and I got
You
to
wanna
go to the
share
White
one?
House. Well, there are several.
Uh-huh.
There are some I couldn't share because I couldn't, but
We'll just cover.
I want
up.
that one.
I'll tell you those when we
We'll
go
go
live.
after when we're
Yeah.
not live, huh? Okay.
One of my favorite was Jim Lehrer was writing Kick the Can, his first book, and he used to sometimes let us read chapters of that. And that was really special because the internet was, I think, in its infancy, but we had a hookup between the New York office and Robin McNeil and the office in Arlington at WETA. So we pretty much had email like it is now, and we could talk back and forth through email, which was really cool.
Wow.
But I was a production assistant, and some of the more fun things that I got to do, one time they forgot to send our paychecks, so they just put me on a plane and sent me to New York for the day, and I got to meet everybody at the New York office and pick up the checks and come home.
Wow.
Now that was a fun day. But there were sometimes 14, 15-hour days.
Mhm.
They would break up production assistant jobs based on like for a week or two at a time. Like this week you're going to be on morgue files, and I loved that because I could read the Washington Post, the New York Times, the New York Post, which is kind of like the Inquirer of newspapers that compared to the others.
Yeah.
And the Christian Science Monitor was in print at the time, and the USA Today. So I'd spend I get there at 8:30 or 9 in the morning, read papers until lunchtime, and cut out every single article that might be important in the future, and and that meant also photocopying if I had to cut into another article, and then filing all of those, and so that was a big task, but I enjoyed reading the newspaper, so I loved it.
Was there one story when you were in New Mexico that really stands out that you really loved?
Well, there were a lot of mundane things, but one of the TV interviews that I did really was special to me because I interviewed Norman Petty's widow, and Norman Petty is the man who worked with Buddy Holly to produce his first music. And he didn't have a lot of music, so his important music. And Norman had died, but she still had the original house, and I got to go upstairs in their garage and stand in the echo chamber where he had recorded, and that was to me an experience kind of like standing in Gettysburg on the field, on the battlefield. It was very somber and chilling, and you could almost feel his presence there.
Wow.
That was really cool. But and I will tell you a story about Jim Lehrer. He'd had his heart attack when I got there already. That had been several years before, and he had a nap every afternoon after lunch on his couch in his office, and his secretary was as protective as a wife-mother combination, and he'd order the same lunch every day, turkey sandwich, and as a production assistant you got to do the lunch runs, and he'd order a turkey sandwich with mayo, and I'd walk past the door and his secretary would say, "Mustard, mustard," and I'd say, "Yes ma'am, yes ma'am." And so I'd bring in the sandwich and I'd make sure she saw the mustard, and I'd lay down the packets, and I'd open up his desk drawer and I'd put a couple of mayo packets in his desk. And I figured, a man who'd had a heart attack and worked as hard as he did, if he wanted a couple packs of mayo, that was my pay grade to sneak it in. So he liked me very much because I respected him enough to bring in his mayo, but also to hide it from his secretary because I think she could have taken me out.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was a wonderful learning experience. It was so high paced and just rush. I mean, I got to go to the Pentagon when Judy Woodruff interviewed Caspar Weinberger. I got to go to the White House when Ronald Reagan was there in the Rose Garden. And
was there any particular time that that you were there with Reagan in the Rose Garden that you remember? A little story to share about that?
Well, there were lots of little stories, but again, there are some that I can't share to get us all in trouble. But I do remember one time, it was probably in July of '86. There were Boy Scouts there for a ceremony. They were getting an award. And something was going on with Russia, unlike today, but still something. And I can't recall exactly what what was going on at the time, but there was a young man who obviously had been given a question, and the question was pretty heated. And I think they'd already planned for that because Reagan's handler was standing right at his elbow, and when that question got asked, all of a sudden, Reagan's elbow shot up and pointed to the upstairs window, and there was Nancy Reagan waiting with the dog, and the dog came out the window, and she's waving, and the dog's waving, and my reporter's brain thinks, wait a minute, and I turned around just in time to see the president's coattails going into the Oval Office and the door shutting, and that was the end of that ceremony. It didn't finish. It did not finish. So.
Wow.
And that was right around the time later when people would begin to question the faculties of the president. So I don't think it was terribly evident at that time, but he certainly was, I think, shielded from answering tough questions, particularly from Boy Scouts.
Oh, wow.
And then shortly after that summer, I got engaged and moved to Virginia Beach and worked in radio, and did not go to law school, and did not stay at McNeil Labor for a long time. But life has turned out pretty well in spite of that. So.
Good.
Yeah.
And so when you were on the radio in Virginia Beach, can you share a little bit about what that was like? Yeah, I imagine.
I have great stories there. Because,
okay.
Well, the only station that I could find at which to work was an easy listening station. And if you can imagine, I was engaged to a Marine who liked hard rock, Metallica and stuff like that. And so I worked from 8 to midnight, and I had to introduce, and now Johnny Mathis, and coming up later. And I had 5 minutes of news to do at the top of the hour, and then I would give the music about 20 after and probably 20 till and maybe 10 till the time. And so he would call me and he would say, "Now, honey, when are you going to talk? Because we'll listen, but we can't listen to that other stuff." He worked in the comm center handling messages, and so they worked 12-hour shifts. And sometimes he would have worked from, I'm trying to think, I can't remember his schedule, maybe 12 to 12. So sometimes he'd be quite tired, and he said, "We can't do that elevator music. We like to hear your news, but that's it." Yeah.
Like Fool on the Hill by 1001 Strings, I remember.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And believe it or not, in 1986 and early 87, that was the #1 station in Virginia Beach, and they're not even there anymore.
Wow.
But it was it was at Waterside in one of those big corporate buildings, and the bay was not the bay, the Elizabeth River. I can't remember. I'm terrible at geography, but the fog would roll in, and I have that nice music, and it was a very lovely place to work. But my fiance just couldn't hack it.
Yeah.
And all the Marines he worked with just weren't interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a part-time job. It wasn't news, but it was radio, and it was all that I could get into in that area. Yeah.
Well, now when you do news, so how do you find out what's happening? How do you gather information? Like here for the Royal Examiner, how do you know what's going on?
Well, a good reporter develops sources.
Okay.
Over time. I mean, people get used to you coming to them to ask for information. You get mailing lists or email lists. The town council, for example, there's a clerk of council, Jennifer Berry. She is amazing because she keeps track of everything. When there's a work session, she has a recording of that. As a matter of fact, and the Royal Examiner is not afraid to apologize when they need to. We recently had a story that talked about Jake Meza, one of the councilmen, commenting that another councilor, Mr. T-Wall, had been rude. And someone said, well, maybe you should listen to the tape. I guess Roger himself, Roger Bianchini, who had written the article, said, "I thought that's what I heard, and that's what I put in the story." He said, "But when Jennifer comes in, because she's a part-time employee, I need to go and listen to that tape." And he did listen to the tape, and he had misheard. Of course, they're all sitting around an oval table, and the reporters are sitting somewhat back. So once he heard that, he corrected it. So it's very important to give the right information and to make a correction when you realize that you have messed up.
Right.
But a lot of what we cover is just simple government meetings, and I have to say they're not always the most exciting things, but you have to pay attention.
Yeah.
I remember when I was at the radio station still, and I had covered a meeting, and I tried to share our stories just so that folks know what's going on. If they don't listen because they're driving to the radio station, then maybe What's Up Front Royal is a good place to catch them and say, here's what happened. And one guy wrote to me one time, I don't have time to go and watch the town video. Just tell me what happened. Sum it up for me. And my sister said, well, you should give him a piece of your mind. And I said, well, actually, I probably just need to give him the information because that's the business that we're in. So however you can reach your audience. But digging is important. I mean, there are a lot of tools. I think a lot of people don't know a lot about the Freedom of Information Act, but a reporter doesn't have any more right to go and get a piece of information than you do. If you wanted to find out who had bought a piece of land, you could walk into the courthouse and research the information and pay your 50 cents a page, same as I could.
Yes.
There is a lot of stuff that happens in any community that people certainly have a right to know, and they can go and get that information themselves. And one of the things that I appreciate about Darrell Funk, who is the new clerk of court in Warren County, he's very friendly and helpful, and he'll tell you, you know, if you go in there and say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to know about this, his staff's the same way. You just have to ask. But if ever somebody tells you, you can't have that, or why do you want to know that, then you just say, well, give me a Freedom of Information form, and I'll fill it out, and I'll get my stuff.
Oh, it's a form that you fill out. What
Well,
do
you can ask for the information. If they push back, then you can just fill out the form. You can get it online, or you can call me at my office. I'll be glad to.
So anything that's sort of public record.
Public record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Land sales, crimes, you know, once they're completed. Like if there's a true bill after someone's indicted, you can go to the courthouse and get that information. Now remember, my dad called me a nosy little girl, and I said I was inquisitive. But as a citizen in this country, you have a right to be just as nosy as you want. A lot of stuff is public information. And I don't say that to send everybody to the courthouse to be nosy, but sometimes people like for information to be not so available. And the public has a right to know. And that's one of the reasons that I feel empowered to do this job, because sometimes things go on that shouldn't.
And you've kind of been on the forefront of a couple of those, right? I mean, a few things
I've
that
tried.
have been going on in town. Yeah.
Yeah, without pointing fingers and naming any stories, I have always tried to get to the truth, but I've always tried to be careful. One must be careful as a reporter, because you can certainly be sued. So yes, it's very important to report the facts accurately.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes, well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that about you. I mean, you do have a tremendous amount of integrity.
Thank you.
And inquisitiveness.
Yeah. You can say nosy, it's fine.
And nosiness.
Yeah.
And that's cool, because I am too. But I think it's really great that you're bringing this to the community, because it is so convenient and easy, and there's not pages that I have to sift through. You also have a Facebook page?
We do. We try to push the stories out to Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook. It can be a great time waster, but it's also a good way to get quick information and then move on. It's a good tool.
Yes.
But thank you for pointing that out. And we do try to share. Believe it or not, What's Up Front Royal has over 12,000 members. If you want to know what's going on in town, you need to go to the What's Up Front Royal page.
Okay.
Hard to believe
I didn't know that.
that many people are interested, but so that's where we try to push stories there too. When I say push, I don't mean we get on and talk about them. We post them there,
right,
so that people know. But and that's a resource for the community too, because they share information. Hey, this is going on. You know, the fire department's having this or that, and we try to reach out to the nonprofits as well and do things.
Right.
But if I will say, if there are folks who are having some difficulty with something and they need some information, they certainly can give us an email, give us a call at the paper.
Okay. Or if they think that there might be something happening that's newsworthy.
We're always looking for news.
Okay.
We absolutely do. And one time I've been trying to work with the schools to let them know we have a link to each school. Try to reach out to privates, but each school has a link at the Royal Examiner, and I really would like to try to beef that up.
And what does that mean? They each have a link.
If you go to the Royal Examiner, let's say you're on there reading the morning news, and you want to find out what menu is at your child's school, you just click on the tab that says school, and then schools, and then you click on your child's school, and then you're right there at the school's page without having to go find Warren County Schools and then find your kid's school page. It's all right there. It's all right there.
Easy.
And I would like to beef that up so that maybe when things happen at the school, you know, your kid has an essay that wins an award, or the intramural sports, or the actual sports, travel sports, I'd like to have all that there on the Royal Examiner. But I haven't had much luck yet getting the schools to populate or send kids our way or send their work our way.
Okay, well maybe that's something you can kind of put out there.
I'm trying.
Okay. So I know we're almost out of time,
Okay.
but let me just ask you quickly.
Sure.
So how can people support your venture here?
Well,
How is it making money?
well, right now, I'm
The tough
working because I
question
love
now.
it. Well, of course, advertisers. You know, advertisers, which it's a really unique advertising opportunity. You know, that's something that we've just gotten an advertising guide together. But if you think about, if you put an ad in the newspaper, if somebody looks at your ad, if you run it twice a month, that's 2 times in 30 days. If they see your ad, if they read it, I mean, I know sometimes as busy as I am, I skim the newspaper. Some days it goes in the recycle bin because I'm just too tired to read it, and I figure I pretty much know what's going on anyway because I have a newspaper. But when you advertise with the Royal Examiner, it's on the website. The ads rotate around. So even if you only go for the chocolate story or what the town council did, you're still going to see that ad. You also, it gets in the mail outs. We will come and do a video of your business. And then we're trying to get to all the local businesses and do a sit-down interview about what's going on. So it's quite a bang for the buck, and it's something that nobody else offers. I mean, the radio doesn't offer it. The print newspaper certainly doesn't offer it. So it's kind of all-inclusive.
Well,